Alright, so what I'm going to do next is try and walk you through how to do some of the things in the calculator. You might not be able to see my screen very well, but you will hopefully be able to see the buttons I'm pushing on the calculator. Know that if you're sitting at home on your Chromebook, you do have the TI-84 Plus as an app on your calculator, as an app on your Chromebook. So know that all the keys and buttons I'm pushing and the way my calculator looks is exactly what your app calculator is going to look like as well. So all the steps I'm going through is going to be the same. Now I'm going to be at the dot cam, which is over here, so you're not going to be able to see me, but you will be able to hear me and then hopefully see the calculator screen. So the first thing I'm going to do, and again this is getting the shoe data typed in, is I'm going to hit my stat button, which is this one right here. And then I need to edit it, so editing is going to be the very top one, and hit enter. And I have all my values typed in. And so again, I know you might not be able to see my screen, but I have all my values typed into list 1. What I'm doing next is I'm going to hit the stat button again, since all my values from the shoe data are typed in here. So I hit stat. Then I'm going to go over to a calc screen, which should be the second one. And then the very first line on the calculator should say 1var stats. And that's what we're going to want to go through and do in order to find our average and our standard deviation and all the statistic things that we need from this data set. So I'm going to calculate that. And on my screen, it gives me an X bar. And then it gives me an E sub x, or a sigma x. Trying to see if I can get you to see this. All right, there we go. So you can hopefully kind of see some of it here. We have x bar, we have sigma sub x squared, s sub x, and then we have this guy sub x. So for what we're using right now, we're looking at x bar, that's our average. And then we want s sub x because this is our standard deviation of the sample. So if I gave you this data set and I said calculate the mean and standard deviation, you would be using x bar and s sub x. N is 21 because we typed in 21 numbers. If you keep arrowing down on that screen, you'll notice that it then gives you a 5-number summary. Your minimum is 2, Q1 is 4, median is 8, Q3 is 14, and max is 45. So you can find those values using the 1var stats feature as well. Going back to the iPad, here we are. You can see that I've written out my average or my mean is 11.095 and standard deviation is 10.44. If you are sitting there thinking, I rounded this to 11.1, is that wrong? No, that's totally fine. In stats, the really beautiful thing is that as long as your decimal or your answer is pretty much approximately right, you're going to be fine. So if you have some slight rounding errors, it's not going to be an issue. An AP reader is going to recognize that and you'll be smooth sailing. I've also written down for you at the bottom of this page what the 5-number summary would look like. So if you were given a problem and it says, here's the following 5-number summary, determine if there's any outliers. They're just going to list out the numbers like this for you. And then I'm going to go through on a fresh page to show you how we're going to calculate outliers and create a box plot and all of that stuff. There's some resources on these pages 63 and 59 of your textbook for 5-number summaries and doing box plots in the calculator, so please make sure you're checking out those. What I'm doing now is I want to walk through with you how we calculate outliers and how we create box plots. So I have my 5-number summary at the top, 2, 4, 8, 14, 45. I first need to calculate my interquartile range, which I have that flip-flopped. It should say Q3 minus Q1. So 14 minus 4, so my interquartile range is 10. So that means 10 is representing the middle 50% of my data set. I've not drawn the box plot yet because I want to show you how to calculate outliers first. So outliers is 1.5 times your interquartile range. You subtract that from Q1 and add it to Q3, which is what I've done here. Notice when I do Q1 minus 15, because I have 1.5 times my IQR, which is 10. That's where I'm getting the 15 from. Q1 minus 15, that's 4 minus 15. That's negative 4. No, it's not. That was bad math. That's negative 11. Whew. It's a Monday when I'm recording this video, so we can blame it on the case of the Mondays. That's negative 11. Notice that my smallest data set, my minimum value here is 2. Negative 11 is well before 2, so I don't have any outliers that are to the left of my minimum. I don't have to worry about that. When I take Q3 plus the 15, because again, it's 1.5 times your interquartile range. That's where I'm getting the 15 from. My interquartile range was 10. Times that by 1.5, I get 15. Q3 plus 15 gives me 29. What this is doing is it's creating these fences, if you will. I like to refer to them as fences or barriers. If I draw a dashed line through approximately 29 on this number line I have here, that's creating this fence, and it's saying any value beyond 29 is going to be considered an outlier. So what that means for me is my maximum of 45 is an outlier. So what we're going to do from here then is I'm going to start drawing this box plot, but I have to take this outlier into account, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that. So I'm going to plot the point for my minimum of 2. And then I have a point at approximately 4, and I'm going by 5s here, for Q1. 8 is my median, plotting that point. 14 is Q3, plotting that point. And now 45 is an outlier because it's outside of my fence. So I'm going to not draw it with a dot, but with this little asterisk looking symbol. And then looking at our data set, what is the next smallest number? And for us, that would be 27. So I'm going to do a dot at 27. Because that 27 value is now going to be my max that I'm graphing. And then I connect my box with Q1, median, and Q3. I have my minimum, which is still the same as before, because when I did Q1 minus 1.5 of my interquartile range, I got a number that was super small, and all my values were larger than that, so we were good to go. So we didn't have to draw a fence at negative 11, because none of our values were smaller than negative 11, because it's negative. But I do have a fence at 29, which means any value outside of that barrier of 29 is considered an outlier. So that 45, which was my only value above 29, is an outlier. Now my next largest value is 27, and so that is the point I draw here to represent that outlier. You might be wondering, well, we found an outlier, Mrs. Walker. Now we need to recalculate everything, a new standard deviation, a new median. Everything changes. No. And you might be wondering, well, why? The reason is because if you start doing that, you're going to eventually get in this little bit of a rabbit hole where you keep then finding more outliers, right? We were able to calculate this outlier because of what our original interquartile range was and what our original Q1 and Q3 values were. So if we begin changing those, that's now changing the rules of how we already established this outlier. And so you don't recalculate any of this. You just mark the outlier with a little asterisk. Okay. You are able to create box plots in your calculator, and that should be on page 59 in your textbook. So your textbook always has kind of like a tech corner where it teaches you how to do all of this stuff in your calculator. If you're sitting there and you're like, I don't have that calculator though, so how do I do this? I'd recommend turning to Google or send me an email, and I might be able to help troubleshoot some things for you with the calculators. Oops. The very last thing we have here, it says, write a few sentences comparing the box plots below. I have some things already mapped out for you on this, so if you're like, oh no, don't show me all that stuff yet, you can stop and fill in all these key features, or what I want you to focus on really is the description. So I have a couple of things laid out for you already of where the median is, or the mean, and where your Q1 and Q3 values are, and your interquartile range and shape and things like that. So I know I already have some of the key features filled in here, but feel free to take a shot at that on your own and then look back at this video to see how your answers compare to mine. Something I want to make note of is when you're reading box plots, they don't have to be horizontal. They can be vertical. Also, if you notice multiple symbols inside the box plot, that's because the line of the box inside is always referring to the median. The additional symbol is referring to your mean or your average. Not every box plot has it, but some of them do, and that's what it's referring to. If you went through and did this and you said, well, Mrs. Walker, I don't agree with all your numbers. I feel like some of your numbers are a little off. I wrote it a little bit differently. And that's okay. They didn't give us exact values here, so we're approximating these values based upon where we think that they line up against the y-axis there. So if your values are a little different than mine, that's perfectly okay. What I do want you to do, though, is take a moment to write out and compare these box plots using the SOX acronym. Compare their shape, compare any outliers, compare any measures of center, and then compare their spread or variability. So that SOX acronym, just like we did before with the histogram, and then the dot plots early on too. So take a moment, come up with a description. It might be a little lengthy because you're comparing 3 distributions, but take a shot at it, and then I will post another video that goes through the description here.